What's up, Toronto commuters? Okay, I think I'm live. What's up, Toronto commuters? I'm just doing this as a live stream event so I can avoid uploading because I'm lazy. But I just wanted to, okay, I'm going to talk about what kind of bike I recommend for commuting in Toronto and why. And then I'm going to stop. So the type of bike I recommend is a touring bike. That's the you could get a mountain bike if you plan on cycling at the edge of the road, where like in the suburbs, most cycling occurs on the sidewalk. So you got to have something that's good for mounting and dismounting off sidewalks. And that's one reason why a lot of people pick mountain bikes for commuting in Toronto, is just you're not supposed to be cycling. So the space that you have, is really rough. So you might as well have a mountain bike to deal with the terrain. And, given all the potholes and everything like that, you might as well have a mountain bike with front and rear suspension so that you can actually just, go somewhere. And because mountain bikes, and especially mountain bikes with suspension, are super slow, you will have to be in the edge of the road because otherwise you'll be slowing people down, and drivers will be road raging on you from behind and stuff, and you can't have that. So if you're gonna go that route, I recommend a electric full suspension mountain bike, which they're super fun. They are legal. I think it's legal to use them in the bike lanes. And it's basically like a dirt bike, except super light and super quiet. So I do plan on getting one of those at some point. They're $3,000 or $2 or $3,000. And for commuting, it's total overkill. But for commuting in hostile territory, if you're not strong, if you can't go fast, or whatever, then that's one way to go. But what I'm basically saying is mountain bikes suck for commuting because they're slow, and people get them for like the stability and for the, being able to handle all the crazy terrain. And then they end up it just makes every trip it just makes every block, like you can really feel every single block that you're doing. And it gives you this kind of like, it just makes you work for every block. So, I mean, you just end up not making a lot of trips just because it's so much effort. And let's see. So instead of like preparing for being in trying to prepare for being on the side of the road where it's rough, you're setting yourself up for a bike that's so slow that you're going to be stuck there on the side of the road or on the sidewalk. And then it's kind of like, you might as well just jog. And that's not really reasonable. It's still, there's good reasons to choose a mountain bike for commuting. It just sucks for that reason. So I recommend not doing that. I recommend using the smooth part of the road. And part of the reason I don't recommend doing the like super slow on the side of the road thing is not really safe. The city has this rationale that if they want to make their minor arterials and major arterials accessible to cyclists, the way to do that is to make the corner, the curb lanes super wide so that you can fit a driver and a cyclist next to each other. But it doesn't work because drivers just go really fast in the center of the lane. So the going super slow riding the edge thing, it just it's kind of inevitably at some point you're going to get some catastrophic collision. So it's better to go fast in a part of the road that you can go fast, using a bike that will go fast. And because it's efficient, there's no distance that really becomes intimidating from an energy point of view. And you can just do whatever commute you want to do. You can do a 15-kilometer commute. You can do 5-kilometer commute, and a 15-kilometer commute, it doesn't turn into a huge physical ordeal like it does on a mountain bike. So road bikes have, narrower tires like that, maybe like 2 centimeters to 3 centimeters, and smooth tires, also hard tires. This is the thing, you got to keep them hard by keeping the pressure high. And the other cool thing about road bikes versus mountain bikes is mountain bikes have so much more, like the tires are so much larger that to keep them at high pressure, they become really heavy. And if you keep them at low pressure, then they just slow you down a lot. So if you are riding a mountain bike, if you want to make it more efficient, and take less effort, just pump up your tires to their like maximum pressure and make them harder so there's less give. And but again, you'll end up with a lot more weight because there's just more room to fill full of air. So you want to have small, narrow, smooth tires and keep them at super high PSI. I keep mine really high. And honestly, if you want suspension, that's what your knees and elbows are for. And that brings me to the other option. Why do I recommend a road bike with the curly handlebars, right, where you're bending over and stuff, instead of a more like commuter-ish bike? Like the commuter bike, the setup for a commuter bike is you're sitting sort of upright, leaning back a little bit, and the whole frame situation is just slanted back a little bit so that your legs, instead of like kind of pushing down, they're pushing a little bit more forward. So you get a good leg extension, but your legs are actually pushing kind of forward out in front of you. And it's a great setup if you're in a place where cycling is, encouraged and supported and the roads are smooth and stuff like that. Toronto's this mix. So you gotta, like, I get by on my touring bike, which is a road bike, because for the most part, it's almost all really smooth roads. So that's great. So I can have my tires super hard, but I still have to get over a whole bunch of bumpy spots. And when you're sitting upright on a bike, you have less of an opportunity to use your limbs as suspension. And you get all the bumps compress your whole torso and your body and your head and everything vertically. And then the other thing that kind of sucks about cycling in like a more upright position is as soon as there's wind, it really sucks. It's just so crappy. And same thing on a mountain bike, because you're basically sitting out, you're sitting forward, and if there's wind against you, it actually turns into an issue. And you can, like, on a I call it like a cruiser, on a classic like hybrid or commuter bike where you're sitting back, you can sort of try to like lean forward and whatever, but it's all designed against that. So it just becomes really uncomfortable, and it becomes this like you're destroying your lower back thing. So that leads to another kind of thing where if you do want to have a bike where you're in an upright position, I suggest a suspension seat post. You get some suspension out of the seat post. You can still keep your you can still keep your tires at high pressure, so you don't. So yeah, like that's my recommendation. If you want to get away with sitting upright without destroying your back, don't do it by having your tires soft. Do it by getting some suspension on your seat. Also, if you want an upright bike, get a step-through bike, which is where the top tube, instead of being straight across, it goes down so that you can just step onto and step off your bike without having to swing your leg over. People think that they're women's bikes, or they were marketed as women's bikes or whatever, but they're just step-through bikes. That's what they're called. And not aluminum ones, but steel ones, because steel has some flex to it. Steel step-through frames will give you a little bit of suspension, and that's it. Like that's my number 2 recommendation for a commuter bike, is a steel frame step-through bike with riser bars, basically, and that's basically the Dutch style bike. And those really are great, except Toronto's a little bit too rough for them, and when it gets windy, it just really sucks. It really sucks in the wind. And that's not really something that you tend to think about when you're going bike shopping. You don't think about wind. You think about paint color. So now that I've gotten you all completely sold on not riding a mountain bike and not riding a cruiser, or having a cruiser as your like other bike, now that I've sold you on getting a bike with super narrow tires, road bike, diamond shaped frame, the curly handlebars, where you're lunged over and you're horizontal. Now that I've sold you on the idea of when you hit a rough patch, you just get off your seat and you're just suspended on your legs and your arms. Like, honestly, that's so much better than suspension on a bike. Like, I've had bikes with double suspension, with just front or just rear suspension. No, there's no bikes with just rear suspension, but I've had all those different, tried all those different things in Toronto, and also the seats with the springs on them. Hey, they work. They're good, and none of that suspension has really, like, it's not better than what I've got now, which is just my knees and my elbows on my road bike. So now that I've made all that very clear, this is really stressful, and I need my nicotine here. Oh, so now that I've gotten you here, I want to explain like what makes a touring bike, and what makes it that different from like other road bikes. And the main difference is it's like a road bike with the gearing that you would expect out of a mountain bike. So it's like a road bike with extra gears for hills. That's basically it. And it's for touring, around the country. Touring just means going far, And in Toronto, where there's hills, and also where you have to be, stopping and starting a lot. You need easy gears. The average 10-speed bike, it doesn't have gears that are really easy enough. It's almost there. It's like good enough for stopping and starting at intersections, good enough for most of what you would find downtown in terms of hills, not good enough for like Caledonia or getting in and out of any of the ravines or anything like that. That's the main difference that you get on a touring bike. So it's like, if you're not gonna be climbing any hills, maybe that doesn't make any difference. Might be able to get by with just a 10-speed drivetrain. The way that you can tell by just looking at the bike is on the front set of gears where the pedals are. There'll be an extra one, like a third one, which is small, be like this big. On mine, it's like that big because mine's a real touring bike. It's got a really tiny, extra tiny gear on the front, and then on the back, the largest gear should be pretty big. Like the back of the back cog should look kind of like it's on a mountain bike, except fewer gears on the back. So mine's got 5 on the back, 3 on the front. A normal 10-speed, it's got 5 on the back, 2 on the front. But on a touring bike, they go from like small to larger. On a road bike, they go from like small to kind of medium size. I don't know. So that's the difference. The ones on the back, the largest one is larger than it would be on a 10-speed racing bike or road bike or whatever. And then the handlebar, the weird curly handlebars and stuff, as you ride these things, it'll make sense. It just, you really want to like not care what it looks like or what the style is supposed to be like or whatever, because the difference it makes, like physically, when you're actually doing stuff, is so huge. And the curly bars, they're basically designed to be like 5 sets of handlebars. So you just have all the different places to put your hands that you kind of need for how bent over or upright you are at the time. So yeah, get a touring bike and then go fast. Far away from the edge of the road where the road is super smooth, and watch your back and keep your nose clean, as in, don't push yourself into any situation that's sketchy. When you got that feeling of sketchiness, you want to always have kind of a mental note of like safe spots on the side of the road that you can pull over to. And then you're watching your back, you're watching your front, and just you respond to that feeling of sketchiness and anxiety by just escaping into your whatever escape spot you have picked out. And then if you just end up escaping when you don't have to, and being like, well, every once in a while I'll have to, so whatever. So that's my recommendation for like what kind of bike to get and why. And it's basically, mountain bikes are just a pain. They make every block just seem like really long. So if you're going to get a mountain bike for commuting, I really suggest one thing you can do, is put narrower tires on it and pump them up really hard. That way you can make a mountain bike kind of halfway toward being, you take a little bit of the lag off of it, and then it's not so bad. So that's just some words of wisdom. Yeah, wisdom from having used each one of these types of bikes. The thing that kind of sucks about road bikes, including touring bikes for commuting, is the shifters. They're designed for somewhat easy access, but they're still not designed with the expectation of having to like come to a complete stop and then start off from nothing and then go really fast and then come to a complete. It's not really meant with that in mind. So On some of my road bikes, I've adjusted it so that I've changed the type of shifter that's on there and put it in a different place on the handlebars. And that's one of the nice things about a more cruiser commuter type of bike with like a 3-speed hub shifter instead of like an external gearing system and stuff like that. Like if you're gonna get a non-road bike, look for something with like a 3-speed hub, and then and just a switch instead of like a normal shifter. It's like a shifter with just like 3 positions, and those are super cool because you just shift gears instantaneously, and that's really super convenient in traffic. That's the only thing that sucks about road bikes or touring bikes like mine for commuting is the gear shifting in traffic. It's kind of annoying. So if I was going to make one change to my bike, it'd probably be just like relocate my shifter so that it's on my handlebars. And I've done this with bikes before, and a lot of road bikes, they actually have moved the shifters to like the end of the bars or whatever. And I mean, on my bike, I could just take the shifter. It's mounted on part of my frame. I could just move it to the handlebar, and then you can just operate both levers with one hand. I've done that before with bikes. It's worked out just fine. But I don't know. I've gotten used to it. It's not really enough of a problem for me to do anything about it. But I've noticed people are, really hesitant to get a bike where they're leaning forward because they think it's going to be uncomfortable. They're hesitant to get a bike with like narrow tires because they think it's going to be unstable, and they're wrong. Those assumptions are a good way to waste several years, or kind of sour yourself to the cycling to commute situation. So consider the road bike.